Hello, my name is Don Hall. I've had the good fortune to be part of the Transition Towns movement for the past 16 years and currently serve as training coordinator for Transition Network. I'm also the author of the Regeneration Handbook, Transform Yourself to Transform the World. This is one in a series of 4 short videos I'm creating for the Practicing Transition campaign based on practices described in my book. In transition, we're trying to build a movement that's big enough to matter. While this requires reaching beyond the small circle of our group to involve more and more people and partners over time, fortunately, we don't have to win over everyone at once. In fact, diffusion of innovations theory suggests that movement building is inevitably a gradual process that unfolds in 5 distinct waves. First, we need to connect with other innovators. Innovators are those who live on the leading edge. They're the people most likely to start new initiatives and step into leadership roles. All movements need innovators to get the ball rolling, but they tend to be a small group. According to Everett Rogers, whose 1962 book, Diffusion of Innovations, synthesized more than 500 studies on this topic, innovators typically only make up about 2.5% of any population. Next, we need to bring in the early adopters. While early adopters may not be the first to take the lead, their role as first followers is essential. By their presence, they signal something important is happening. Their genuine enthusiasm also makes them good messengers and likely volunteers and donors. In political terms, they're our base. Rogers estimated early adopters represent about 13.5% of the total. In my experience, the early majority is full of well-meaning, compassionate people who are sympathetic to our cause, but may not initially feel that they have the time, energy, or inclination to engage more deeply. However, if they see our approach is working and gaining momentum, they might be persuaded to jump on board. As they represent an estimated 34% of the total, winning over the early majority is key to mainstreaming any movement. The late majority is also estimated at around 34%. People in this group typically don't care about much beyond their own personal interests, but when something becomes popular enough among the early majority, they may simply follow along to avoid getting left behind. Finally, we come to the laggards. They are approximately 16% of the total and can be thought of as people who are ideologically opposed to what we're trying to do. Although we may eventually win over some of them, I would caution against spending too much time trying to convince them. If we can get enough innovators, early adopters, and members of the early majority on board, that should be sufficient. The best estimate I've seen for a cultural tipping point is around 25%. This suggests that we may reach critical mass as soon as we have won over about half of the early majority. One tool I've found to be especially effective for thinking about how to reach beyond the choir and engage the early majority is spiral dynamics. Originally developed as the emergent cyclical theory of adult human development by psychology professor Claire Graves, spiral dynamics was introduced to the general public by Don Beck and Chris Cowan, and further popularized by Ken Wilber. In its most basic form, spiral dynamics describes 6 first-tier worldviews that have emerged in response to changing life conditions throughout human history and continue to exist to some extent in our world today. Spiral dynamics also identifies various levels of second-tier or integral consciousness. While first-tier worldviews tend to believe that they alone perceive reality accurately and everyone else is fundamentally deluded, integral consciousness recognizes that each embodies a unique wisdom and energy that's necessary for the health of the whole. For this reason, the integral activist seeks to weave them all together in such a way that they are not merely able to coexist, but can actually complement and benefit each other. While there are reasons spiral dynamics is usually presented as a hierarchy of increasing levels of consciousness, this can be easily misconstrued as a way to pigeonhole others and look down on them from our imagined perch at the top. In fact, all of us carry each of these worldviews within us to varying degrees. This is why I prefer to represent spiral dynamics as a round table round which each of the first tier worldviews are seated. This makes it clear that none is meant to be perceived as higher or lower, and it's only by placing the integral perspective in the center that we can all come together as equals and allies. So, what are these worldviews, and how might we engage them? We might see beige most obviously reflected in people who are living on the streets, just struggling to get by or caught up in the midst of a war or other disaster. Because beige experiences its world as a fundamentally chaotic and hostile place, it's focused primarily on ensuring its own survival. Beige's strengths are that it's extremely pragmatic and resourceful. Like all of the other worldviews, when beige becomes too extreme or is applied in the wrong context, it becomes unhealthy and problematic. However, when it's properly balanced, it can make a valuable contribution to the entire spiral. We might interest beige by organizing practical projects that help meet basic needs and by offering opportunities for reskilling. We might explain transition to beige by saying it's about building local resilience and self-reliance. Purple can be most readily seen in groups that are tightly bonded together, like some spiritual communities and communes. These groups tend to have their own myths, rituals, and culture that set them apart from the rest of society. Because purple experiences its world as a mysterious and sometimes magical place, it's primarily focused on its own spiritual journey and communion with those it considers to be its tribe. At its best, purple is deeply insightful and highly nurturing towards others. Those with dominant purple tendencies may find themselves drawn to anything that involves community building, visioning in art, and the inner transition. To entice purple to join our movement, we might say that transition is about reconnecting with ourselves, with each other, and the earth. In days of yore, red was the driving force behind warriors and empire builders. But today it's more likely to be seen in athletes, gangs, and the military. Because red experiences its world as a threat or challenge to be overcome, its primary focus is on acquiring and exercising power. Although red can be aggressive and reckless, it also has the potential to inspire others with its toughness and daring. And while it may not have the patience to sit through long, process-heavy meetings, red is likely to be among the first to engage in bold and impactful actions. Describing transition as being about rising to the unprecedented challenges of our time has the potential to appeal to red. Blue is most often found in rural communities, conservative politics, and mainstream religions. Because it experiences its world as conforming to an unchanging moral order, its primary focus is on providing for its immediate family and maintaining stability. Although blue's conservatism can cause it to stubbornly cling to the past and try to impose its ideas of right and wrong on others, its commitment to being a good neighbor and living in a righteous way can be channeled positively. While blue is unlikely to overthrow the system, it might be persuaded to participate in what it sees as common sense efforts, such as supporting local farms and businesses. We might evoke blue's strong sense of personal responsibility by asserting that transition is about leaving a better world behind for future generations. Orange is the unofficial worldview of the industrial growth society and is most obviously prevalent in realms of business, science, and technology. Because Orange experiences its world as an opportunity to be seized, it's primarily focused on achievement and progress. To be successful in a predominantly orange world, I believe transition needs more orange people who know how to run organizations, think strategically, and raise money. Orange could be enticed by actions having to do with social enterprise, policy change, and scaling up. An effective message for Orange might be that transition is about unleashing the collective genius to design innovative solutions. At last, we come to green, which is the center of gravity for most progressive activists, including most of us involved in transition. Because green experiences its world as something that has been polluted, corrupted, and broken, mostly by red, blue, and orange, its primary focus tends to be on healing, sustainability, and social justice. Green is wonderfully compassionate and collaborative, but it goes too far when it rejects all of the other worldviews in favor of its own strict ideological purity. Green is naturally aligned with transition's vision of a just and regenerative future, so it doesn't typically require much convincing. However, we might simply say to green that transition is about communities coming together to reimagine and rebuild our world, which happens to be the tagline for Transition Network. For those interested in putting integral activism into practice, here's an exercise I learned and adapted from Colorado-based permaculture teacher and integral thinker Marco Lamb. Start by selecting a practical project you've been involved in the past or have heard about that you believe has the potential to be highly integral. If none comes to mind, you're welcome to research one on the internet or invent your own. Once you've selected a project to focus on, write down everything you know about that project and consider how it might appeal to each of the 6 primary worldviews. Then, redesign it as necessary. When you're ready, present your proposal to a council representing each of these worldviews. Following your presentation, the council provides feedback, then votes thumbs up or down on the proposal. Then, if there are 1 or more objections and time allows, you may revise your proposal and try again. This activity can be done in a group of 7 or more people or individually by playing all 7 roles yourself. That's all for this video. Please visit practice.transitionmovement.org for more great transition practices. Thanks for listening and good luck.